I finally received my copy of Don't Bleach My Fist, the brand new Bleach light novel by Ryohgo Narita and Kubo. These light novels tell a what-if scenario about an alternative universe where all of the Bleach characters attend high school. This school gang story is fascinating, as Kubo spent a lot of time drawing new artwork we've never seen before for this light novel, and within this video we're going to go over every single detail about Don't Bleach My Fist. I'll explain the story from the beginning prologue all the way to the very end chapter. I want to give a massive thanks to Ichigo Taicho, who's actually posted the translations for Don't Bleach My Fist over on X. So this is what I'll be using to read the translation of the light novel. So we begin with the prologue. Kurosaki Ichigo's a new student at Gotei High School. Though there were occasional troubles, a peaceful school life has begun. However, the fanatics of Stern-Cross Academy close in on Ichigo as though guided by fate itself. A conflict that would later become the legend of Karakura Town was about to begin. The Bleach high school warfare spin-off that became hugely popular as an April Fool's project is now written by Ryohgo Narita's sensei. As with most Bleach volumes and light novels, there's a poem that begins Don't Bleach My Fist, but you want to believe, don't you, that even a blue sky so vast it could crush them, someday they will tear it apart with their very spines. These words are said from Ichigo's point of view, as his words are targeted towards the Stern-Cross School. This is the rival school that the Gotei High School is up against within Don't Bleach My Fist. So this is a story concerning the large-scale conflict within Karakura Town as told by a certain student informant. It all begun with an attack on Shuhei Hisagi, a second-year student at Gotei High School. Maybe things had already been moving beneath the surface long before that, but it's not like we're cops or some great detectives, so we don't know that much. If you trace back how the tension began between Gotei High and Stern-Cross Academy, it grew into something dangerous. The cause probably lies in that guy Hisagi getting beaten so badly enough that he ended up hospitalized. That bastard was a real fool. So now we dive into the relationship between the two different schools. You know about the relationship between Gotei and Stern-Cross, right? Back when the founders, the current principals, first built the schools, they were apparently clashing with the intensity of a full-blown Yakuza war. But around 10 years ago, that feud finally settled down, and a sort of peace came over things. So at the time of the conflict before this one, the disputes between Gotei and Stern-Cross had mostly been reduced to the occasional minor scuffle. This was when things finally started getting heated. We got dragged into it too, and honestly it turned into a real pain in the ass. So the head of Gotei High appears to be Yamamoto, and the head of Stern-Cross is Yuhabaha himself. Each school had its own guys coming out to back them up, but what you really want to hear about is that guy, right? Kurosaki Ichigo. You already know him, don't you? A first year at Gotei High School. In this conflict, he became the Eye of the Storm. But he wasn't the only one. There was also a first year from Stern-Cross named Ishida Uryu, and a first year from Stern-Cross named Hyozaki Grimjow. What you'll have to know is that the Quincy and Arrancar names have been changed within the light novel so that the respective characters have Japanese names. So Hyozaki Grimjow's name in this light novel has been given to him by Kubo as he went through all of the Arrancar and Quincy and changed their names. Hyozaki was basically unknown before, and he suddenly shot up in fame lately. If that whole mess hadn't happened, Kurosaki and Ishida probably would have just spent their 3 years in peace, and Hyozaki might have just stayed stuck in Stern-Cross without ever going anywhere. But nah, that's not it. Those guys always end up getting dragged into something or causing it themselves anyway. Either way, like you already know, the conflict happened, and Kurosaki and the others got neatly dragged out into the open, right onto the hot plate that is Karakura. The real dangerous ones stand out the most at times like this, not like our leader who's always going around trying to show how great he is. Yeah, the real deal. Man, anyway, I'm getting hungry. And speaking of that guy over there, you really gonna make me keep talking for free? If you want to hear the rest, at least buy me a meal. I'm not gonna force you or anything, but once my stomach's full, I tend to talk more freely. But now I'll settle for 20 convenience store donuts. So that's the end of the prologue spoken by a mysterious student informant. Chapter 1 begins with a sudden downpour worthy of being called a gorilla rainstorm. It had engulfed all of Karakura town. Amid the heavy rain and rumbling thunder, the school chimes rang out across multiple schools in the city, opening the gates to that chaotic realm known as after school. Unbothered even as their shoes were soaked and sinking in the downpour, the students, brimming with excess energy, began spilling out into the city, each intent on exercising their own freedoms and constraints. Among those students, some gathered at a modestly stylish cafe. The Cafe Asguiaro, located in the eastern part of the city, was known, oddly enough, for serving heavy meals like steak and ramen at low prices, making it a bustling spot constantly filled with students from nearby high schools and universities. Normally, that alone would be enough to ruin its stylish atmosphere, but the owner, Asguiaro Iben, does not give up. Even though those menu items were originally thrown out in desperation during a time with no customers and ended up becoming a comeback success, he has no intention of removing them and instead struggles to maintain the cafe's proper image through other aspects. The interior with its refreshing white colour scheme is always kept meticulously clean, and from an antique style jukebox, western music from decades ago continues to play. The sound gently spreads throughout the shop, steadily smoothing the frayed, restless hearts of the young-filled students. However, while not enough to completely break that calm atmosphere, there are those who do not bother to hide their own nature. They are the group in black school uniforms, seated in the back section of the shop. At a glance, they look like just a group of high school students, and in fact they are, but the surrounding customers can't help but be aware of them. It's not that they're being loud or acting overtly intimidating, yet naturally part of one's attention is drawn toward them, a group with that kind of strange pull. One who, while holding sharp, keen eyes behind glasses, quietly reads a book on embroidery techniques. One with short, neatly cut orange hair, the color of sunset clouds, is sipping a chocolate latte. One with fiery red hair and harsh, rugged eyebrows, patiently waiting for the taiyaki he ordered. One distinguished by a shaved head, glaring at the menu with rough, aggressive eyes. One of them is delicately checking his own refined features in a small hand mirror, adjusting the curl of his eyelashes. One who carries an air reminiscent of a snake, always wearing a faint smile that conceals his true emotions. Then there's one with a sturdy soldier-like physique, leaning back in his chair while flipping through a magazine. And lastly, there's one, though he looks small enough to be mistaken for an elementary schooler, among the group he is the most composed and unshaken. The 8 boys in black school uniforms, just by sitting there, create a kind of singular presence within the cafe. Look, Gotehai's dangerous bunch is all here. Sweating nervously, a group of students that were seated near the entrance muttered this without addressing anyone in particular. You serious? Even Hitsugaya and Ichimaru are together. Aren't they supposed to hate each other? Well, they've been having trouble with Stern Cross lately, so something's probably going on. That's Muguruma, huh? He's only a bit tall, but damn, he's built. He supposedly knocked down a charging motorcycle with his bare hands. If Madarame is here, yeah, then Ayasagawa is also here too. That's the Kendo Club captain and the guy famous as a magazine model, right? What kind of combo is that? One thing's for sure, they're both strong. Madarame's little sister is cute, huh? If you mess with her, you're dead. By the brother and the sister herself. Hey, that's Abarai-kun, right? I saw him at a live show the other day. That band, I think someone from Sterncross was in it too, right? The orange-haired guy and the glasses guy, I don't recognize them. Are they first years? The orange-haired one was pretty famous back in my middle school district. At each table, students whispered among themselves from their own different perspectives. A jumble of voices rose and faded throughout the cafe. Even those doing the talking aren't exactly well-behaved types. They look like the kind you wouldn't hesitate to call delinquents. However, in the eyes that look toward those seated in the back, the usual rebellious spirit has completely vanished. Some holding a sense of awe, others watching with pure fear or even disgust in their eyes. For students, information is like blood circulating through the body. From trending videos to social relationships, nearby shops and transportation, and even academic matters like schools and school rankings to live properly, they must continuously circulate a vast amount of knowledge as nourishment, and the boys who hang around the cafe, the kind commonly called delinquents, have an even greater need to gather more specialized information. Who are the strong ones around them? What are their connections or their particular weaknesses? The relationships between nearby schools, the boundaries of each other's territory, and whether certain individuals possess unseen influence through antisocial organizations or similar groups, knowing who from which school has been injured and to what extent. On a more mundane level, knowing which places would still hire them even with tattoos or dyed hair. And for those involved in shady activities, information such as police patrol routes, safe hangout spots, and escape routes from hostile groups, including the police themselves. For motorcycle riders, simply knowing which alleys can only be passed through by two-wheel vehicles completely changes how they deal with emergencies. And above all else, the most important piece of information for avoiding disaster is knowing whether the person in front of you is stronger than you or not. For ordinary students living peaceful lives, however, most of this information is utterly meaningless. However, for those hot-blooded types, it is quite literally a matter of life and death. If you rampage while lacking oxygen, you'll quickly end up flat on your back, gasping for air. That said, it isn't an absolute rule. Sometimes, without being influenced by such information, there appear true monsters, like whales that keep diving through a sea of violence without needing to breathe, and the sharp-eared delinquents already knew it. And the sharp-eyed ones understand it even at first glance. Right now, the 8 people occupying the back of this cafe are without a doubt that kind of group. Clad in jet black uniforms, yet giving off a wide range of different colours in their presence, they were a group that just by sitting there made observers imagine some kind of story. Though, to be fair, it would be a story far removed from anything peaceful, and those very individuals pay no mind to such public perception, continuing on their own path. Don't you think we're being looked down on a bit too lightly? Unaware of the various words about them flying around nearby, one of the group, a bald man, gripped a transparent grey umbrella and was insisting on something rather odd. This vinyl umbrella, you see. At the words of that student, distinguished by a neatly shaved head and red markings at the corner of his eyes, the high schoolers around him, who seemed to be his companions, replied in a calm, indifferent tone. "What's with you all of a sudden?" Following the orange-haired boy's question, the small figure seated at the back also frowned and asked, "More importantly, why do you bring an umbrella in here, Madarame?" The bald man Madarame Ikaku dutifully answered the small upperclassman Hitsugaya Toshiro. The umbrella stand at the entrance was already full. When I got here, there was still space though. Hitsugaya, glancing out the window and listening to the heavy rain, urged him to continue. "So what about that umbrella? This umbrella of mine, this is already my 3rd one this month. What, you broke it again messing around in fights?" At the orange-haired boy's remark, Madarame glared at him, a vein popping at his temple. "Like hell I would, I'm not some elementary school kid, and what do you mean again? That's weird. So basically it got snatched, right?" "Yeah, that's right, first time at a convenience store, second time at a bathhouse." Madarame frowned irritably as he said that, but quickly brightened up and continued, "But I'm the luckiest guy in the Gote." With a confident grin gripping his vinyl umbrella, Madarame said, "This 3rd one, I just happened to run into the guy while he was stealing it, so it ended up safe. If you were really lucky, it wouldn't have been stolen in the first place." The extremely reasonable remark from the orange-haired boy was followed up by the red-haired boy Abarai Renji, who then spoke. "Well, it's not like you often get a chance to personally catch the culprit." "No," as Madarame suddenly grew hesitant. Everyone around him tilted their heads in confusion. The one who explained the reason was the gentle-faced boy sitting next to Madarame, Ayasegawa Yumichika. The one stealing it was a kid, about elementary school age. Even Ikaku couldn't exactly hit him, so he just lectured him. Even if the opponent is an older martial artist, if you hit them, you're the one who'll get arrested. Without taking his eyes off his embroidery book, the bespectacled boy Ishida Uryu said, "It may seem unreasonable, but when a private individual punishes an offender on their own, it's considered vigilante justice. Even though you're the fastest to throw hands, your mouth's still ridiculously serious as ever." The orange-haired boy said this in exacerbation, and Ishida, closing his book, replied with a displeased tone, Don't lump me together with someone like you who only thinks of the reason after throwing a punch. I simply understand that the world doesn't run on words alone. Then, glancing toward the window where lightning flashed beyond the roaring rain, he quietly added, especially in this city as it is now. That's the end of chapter 1 as we begin chapter 2. At that same time, downtown district, western Karakura town. "Ah, my fingers, my fingers." A thug-looking man let out a groan that bordered on a scream as he dropped his knees into a puddle on the grimy, fouled asphalt. The cry was swallowed by the pounding rain and thunder. In the downtown district emptied by the storm, no one paid him any attention. Even the few passers-by who noticed him quickly looked away and moved on. Goddamn rich bastards, what the hell was that? What the thug looked down at, with all the fingers of both hands bent in impossible directions, twisted like the limbs of some grotesque object, was a tall man clad in a black shirt with pure white embroidery running across it. But he never even got a proper look at the student's expression, because the sole of the shoe was already closing in on his face. Gah! He's hit as his nose and upper lip were crushed under the heel of a shoe, and his blood and front teeth scattered into the rainwater pooling beneath him. Like a flash before his eyes, a thought crossed his mind. How the hell did this even happen? But in truth, he had only done what he always did. He had taken advantage of the sudden downpour and stolen someone else's umbrella. A few seconds later, a voice called out from behind him. He turned without even caring that he was getting drenched, and he saw a student standing there. It seemed the other person was the owner of the vinyl umbrella that had been left beside a nearby building. The other party was tall, though still clearly a student. His left eye glared sharply, and long black hair hung behind him, wet from the rain. Clicking his tongue, the thug muttered, "The hell are you talking about?" At that moment, the student's long fingers wrapped around the thug's right hand, the one gripping the umbrella. Is that so? In the next instant, his left hand was crushed by an overwhelming grip. Like molded clay, his fingers had been snapped and crushed. His palm, smeared with blood and greasy sweat, clung to the vinyl umbrella's handle. This was the third time since today began. At a convenience store, at a public bath, there had been no trouble at all. It didn't even look expensive. If anything, he had deliberately gone after a cheap vinyl umbrella. And still, why me? Why had things ended up like this? Just as that thought surfaced, a violent impact struck him. It was the thug who had just stomped him. Following up on the attack, the thug drove the tip of his toes into him. Karakura Town East District Cafe Asquiaro. Well, according to the brat I gave a talking to, there are piles of vinyl umbrellas in stands, so people start to feel like they're basically abandoned anyway, thinking it's fine. Ikaku didn't resort to yelling at him, but his naturally rough look alone seemed to be enough to intimidate him. As if to bring it to a close, Madarame found himself in the unusual position of calming down the umbrella thief, who looked like he was about to cry. Rather than being angry at the kid himself, he seemed to be directing his frustration at the fact that umbrella theft had become so common. This umbrella, say it were made of pure gold worth 1,000,000 yen. You wouldn't think it'd be so easy to steal, would you? 1,000,000 wouldn't even cover it. That'd be too much. At that point, it wouldn't be umbrella theft, real robbers would be after it. Ignoring the simultaneous remarks from the others, Taku continued pressing his point. Anyway, this thing does more than enough for what it's meant to do. I don't buy judging something just because it's cheap or expensive. Well, there are expensive umbrellas that break easily too. At Hitsugaya's words, Yumichika lifted his head. It's quite common, you know. Compared to refined, designed, focused pieces, mass-produced products from major manufacturers are often more durable and more functional. It almost sounded like he was criticizing luxury items, but Yumichika continued, expressing his opinion while speaking politely to the third-year Hitsugaya. Even so, if I think it suits me, I'll buy it, even if it's expensive. Performance comes second. Even if it breaks by that evening, there's beauty in that fleetingness in how it fades. Hey, you drifted off. It's not even about money anymore. In response to Madarame's remark, Yumichika answered with a calm smile. Well, maybe even something cheap can become beautiful if I use it. If we're talking umbrellas, honestly, I don't even need one. Being drenched in the rain can be refined in its own way. I see, don't catch a cold. Yumichika said this without even joking, completely serious in his self-admiration, but those around him used to it brushed it off lightly. Ignoring their reactions, Yumichika wrapped up his point. In the end, it's not that people look down on them as something cheap, but because it's too common. Everyone uses the same vinyl umbrellas, so it starts to feel like shared property. That's why bike thieves don't go away. It's not like people don't steal expensive bikes or motorcycles either. Yeah, true. As Yumichika wrapped up his point without caring how the others took it, the narrow-eyed boy who had been silent until now, Ichimaru Gin, opened his mouth with that faint smile still on his face. Whether something's cheap or valuable, I just don't like stealing other people's things to begin with. Well, sure, but if some idiot ever tried to steal from you, I'd feel sorry for them. When the man built like a soldier Kensei Muguruma said that, Ichimaru continued, carrying an air that brought a snake to mind. That's unfair, Muguruma, you're making it sound like I do something cruel to the culprit. You're the type who, once you decide someone's an enemy, you'll chase them all the way to hell. At Hitsugaya's words, Ichimaru simply shrugged, that faint smile still on his face. That sounds more like you, Hitsugaya. Scary, really scary. You're the one person I wouldn't want as an enemy. Even the way he phrased his words carried that same serpentine quality. It was unsettling, quietly unsettling. Just listening to him, you'd somehow feel wrapped in smoke, and by the time it cleared and your senses returned, it was as if you'd already been swallowed whole. That was the kind of man Ichimaru, a third year, was. Among those present, there were 3 upperclassmen from Gotei High, Ichimaru, Muguruma, and Hitsugaya. Next came the second years, Madarame and Ayasegawa. The remaining 3 were first years who had enrolled that spring. At a glance, they looked like a group calmly chatting about vinyl umbrellas, but to those with the eye for it, they carried the air of a pack of beasts. Not a controlled pack, but a gathering of solitary individuals, each keeping the others in check. Were they taming the beasts within themselves, or had they never intended to chain them at all? The other customers nearby, unsettled by that intangible tension, suppressed their presence as much as possible and waited for the rain to stop. Karakura Town, West District, downtown. Stop, you bastard, it's just an umbrella. The delinquent, who could no longer speak properly after having his front teeth broken, cried out, a mixed, distorted cry, trembling with fear, anger, and pleading. You're saying it's just an umbrella. With that, the student leaned forward and forcibly tore the umbrella from the delinquent's hand. His already broken fingers bent even further, and the delinquent screamed again. Is that dried up brain of yours more useful than an umbrella? Though he wore a layered smile, his voice carried a quiet irritation. If anything, it felt eerily calm. At that moment, the delinquent quickly realized something, that if necessary, the student before him would kill him without hesitation. Cold sweat from pain and fear poured from his body, mixing with the rain and chilling him to the bone, as if driving his body temperature below freezing. The next words came filled with naked killing intent. Of course not. Trash like you doesn't have that kind of value. Then, cutting through the tension, another student's voice echoed through the alley. You'll be late, Jingawa-senpai. Jingawa Noiji Noitora. You're planning to give orders, Zairo. Kuranji Zairo Zail Opero. At the words of the man who had just beaten down the delinquent, Jingawa Noiji, the man in the same school uniform whose name had been called Kuranji Zairo, smiled faintly as he sheltered himself from the rain beneath a pure white umbrella, unlike the cheap vinyl kind. Not at all, I simply don't wish to sour the mood of the others. After all, Koyadera-senpai, Koyadera Stark, from the third years is also here. Though Zairo, being the junior, spoke in polite form, there was no real sense of respect toward his seniors in his attitude. Still putting on that smug schemer face, huh? Gripping a vinyl umbrella whose handle was still smeared with blood, Noiji Noitora started walking down the alley, as if he had no interest in the week. He no longer paid even the slightest attention to the delinquent still screaming behind him. And then, what they arrived at was a place no more than a minute away from there, a certain nightclub. Chapter 3 begins at the nightclub Luders. The moment they opened the heavy soundproof door fixed at the entrance, a deep bass that seemed to make the blood vessels throughout their bodies dance shook the eardrums of Noiji Noitora and Zairo Zail Opero. Inside the dimly lit club, a cloyingly sweet shisha scent clung to the air, but perhaps because it was still before opening hours, there was no actual smoke drifting about at all. Since it was before business hours, the flashy lighting was toned down, and even the strobe lights, which normally burned into one's retinas, were nowhere to be seen. Whether it was the taste of a staff member preparing the place or a request from someone in the VIP seats, despite it being before opening, heavy bass Western music echoed from the speakers, and vibrations rising from the floor transmitted themselves to the soles of Noiji's shoes with every step. The empty main floor with no one dancing gave off a lonely, desolate atmosphere, yet just like during business hours, the throbbing music only emphasized the nightclub's sense of strangeness. The staff preparing for opening turned their eyes towards them, but upon seeing the pure white school uniforms, returned to their work as if avoiding involvement. Noiji, Noitora and the others showed no interest in those staff and headed straight toward the VIP lounge on the second floor. Along the way, the club's counter came into view. Even for someone who doesn't frequent clubs, it had the kind of counter one would recognize from Western movies. A flashy bartender with dreadlocks dyed black on one side and white on the other, along with several facial piercings. He was wiping a glass with mechanical, emotionless movements. The bartender gave them only a brief glance at first, but showed no sign of reprimanding Noiji, Noitora and the others for entering before opening. Perhaps lending out seats before opening for things like deals was simply something they did regularly. Thinking of it that way, even the flashy decorations inside the club felt like nothing more than a thin veneer concealing shady dealings. While entertaining such thoughts, Noiji continued forward as though none of it mattered. On the VIP lounge sofas, 6 students wearing the same uniform as Noiji and the others were seated. A sharp-featured boy characterized by sky blue dyed hair and a modified short-length school uniform. An expressionless boy who, even within such an unusual group, carried an even more distinct hollow-like emptiness. A boy who alone gave off a lighter air, easygoing air, yet whose eyes observed the surroundings more sharply than anyone else's. A long-haired boy with the face of a quiet bookworm, his mouth hidden behind a black mask. A boy with a striking mohawk that stood out like flames in the dark room, making no attempt to hide his sharp, aggressive presence. A mature-looking student in uniform sitting deeper inside, openly displaying a languid attitude, yet wearing a solemn expression. Oh, there you are. You guys are the last. One of them, a boy with wavy bangs and square-shaped tinted glasses, wearing a flashy purple patterned open collar shirt under his uniform, the cheerful-looking boy, Nakuraba Askin, commonly called Askin, casually raised his hand. I'm glad Zyro came. With this lineup, aside from me, almost nobody talks, and the few things that do get said are always dangerous. But those guys don't care about that, right? The atmosphere in here is so heavy, it's unbearable. To Askin, who said that with a shrug, Jingawa Noiji cut him off with a single remark, "You're too damn light," and dropped heavily into an empty seat. Meanwhile, Zyro, without changing his suggestive smile, spoke while watching Askin with a hint of caution in his eyes. We were never the kind to sit around chatting amicably to begin with, were we? That includes you and me. How cold, why not take this as an opportunity to improve our relationship? Try thinking a little more positively. If the need arises, I'll bow my head from my side eventually. Zyro, with an attitude that suggested he had no issue taking the lowest seat, chose not to sit on the sofa, but on a stool at a nearby sub-counter. In a way, it was as though he was asserting, I stand apart from the rest of you, but perhaps because this was typical of Zyro, no one commented on it. Instead, the man seated deepest inside, Koyadera Stark, after confirming that everyone was present, glanced at his watch and spoke with visible annoyance. Not much time left. If you're gonna drink something, order it now. Acting like a damn guardian, you never move normally, what a pain. At the shaved head mohawk boy, Bachiguro Bazby, who snorted in ridicule, Stark shrugged his shoulders and replied, I don't want to be the one handling something this troublesome either. If one of you's gonna do it, then do it. Makes it easier for me. Stark said it with a face that genuinely looked fed up from the bottom of his heart. Even Baz, who had been throwing out sarcastic remarks, seemed to lose his edge and moved to sit back down on the sofa. But there was someone who wouldn't allow that. A grinding sound, like minerals scraping, echoed. It was the sound of the edge of the marble table in the lounge being shaved away. The finger Noiji had placed on the table had carved away part of the solid slab with nothing but the force of his fingertip. Don't go pulling something that lets them look down on you, Stark. You'll let the idiots get carried away. It was clearly a taunt directed at some of those around them. Since earlier you guys had been glaring with those cocky looks, your attitude's out of line, you bastards. Rather than anger, he provoked them with a voice laced with irritation mixed with ridicule. The atmosphere froze in an instant. The ones who reacted were Bazby and the boy with sky-coloured hair. The latter especially rose from his chair, stepped in front of Noiji to block him, and opened his mouth. Just cause you're a senior, you think people should bow to you. You've gotten pretty damn old, haven't you, Noiji? A blunt retort in response to a blunt provocation. Noiji bared his teeth and raised the corners of his mouth, then stood up and pressed his forehead against that underclassman with sky-coloured hair. Don't get it twisted, you stray cat bastard. The hell do you say? Age doesn't mean shit. Noiji places a hand on the underclassman's shoulder. A pressure bore down on him through that palm. Just moments ago their eyes had been level, but now he was being forced down nearly a head's height. The sky-head boy felt as though a massive tree had come crashing down onto his shoulder. It's simple, just show proper respect to someone stronger than you. Fine by me. The sky-head boy twisted his mouth into the grin of a carnivorous beast about to hunt its prey. That expression turned into a fearless smile as he bared his fighting spirit and glared up at Noiji. Noiji looked completely down on him, but he wasn't the kind of man to let his guard down before a beast baring its fangs. Keeping a predator's smile on his face, he focused his nerves into his fingertips. But then a shadow cut in between them. It was Baz, who had reacted alongside the sky-head boy to the provocation. Hey, why the hell are you turning this into the usual routine on your own? Pathetic, mad I beat you to it? You don't get it, I'm saying you're not good enough for this. They glared at each other with savage grins, but neither forgets to keep Noiji in check. A true beast with fangs never neglects its awareness of its surroundings, understanding that Noiji also maintained the composure of a superior. Enough, come at me all at once, that way I only have to crush you in one go. That's my line, you know, senpai. That's not even funny. Each of the three wore a fearless grin. It almost looked like they were baring their fangs to crush their prey's neck. In the next instant, each of them began to move to deliver a full-force blow, but a dry bang and the smell of gunpowder diverted the attention of all three. Above their heads, glittering tape and confetti danced, reflecting the ceiling lights as if mocking the tension. Beside them stood Askin, holding an empty party popper and speaking with an unapologetic look on his face. Alright, that's enough. You guys are getting a little too wild. Askin, you bastard. Knock it off, you all go to the same stern cross. You can settle who's strongest any time, right? Fighting among yourselves in a place like this doesn't do a damn thing for you. Askin added, flicking the used party popper into an ashtray, he said, though if it were poison, at least it'd have its uses. Then why don't you go find him one? The so-called cure for idiots. Noiji said this to Askin while glancing sideways at the sky-head boy. In the still tense atmosphere, Stark started to speak, but beating him to it, the previously silent, expressionless boy, Shinhara Uruka Ukiura, spoke for the first time that day. I've no interest in you tearing each other apart. An anomaly. From Noiji's perspective, no, from anyone's, there was something off about Uruka Ukiura's presence. By the time his voice was heard, Uruka was already standing between Noiji and the other two. Without making a sound or giving off any presence, even Zairo and Stark, who had been observing from a short distance away, had no idea when he had moved between them. Most of those present found their wariness toward the man named Uruka rising at once. I do have some interest in what happens next, don't interfere. You're still one weird bastard. What, you pulling magic in a fight or something? Noiji hadn't noticed Uruka at all, but whether it had taken the edge off him, or perhaps the tension had simply been drained, he sat back down on the sofa as he asked provocatively. It's just technique, magic doesn't exist, and I have no need for it. After stating it flatly, Uruka returned to his seat without changing his expression. Seeing this, the straight black-haired boy, noto est as not, who alone had not joined the conversation as if he were an outsider, muttered something that was, as expected, far too out of place among this group. Why does everyone not value their lives and bodies? The only one who heard that murmur was Zyro nearby. And so he clearly heard the final words Est added. Nothing but foolish humans. As for that, I agree. Zyro was also well acquainted with the student known as Noto Est. Well enough to know even the fragment of madness buried in the very depths of Est's heart. That's exactly why someone, including you, needs to play it well. They too were youths with their own quirks. No, more than that, possessing that charm that draws conflicts toward them. However, they were clearly different from the black uniformed students gathered on the east side of Karakura town. Like the members of Gote High, they were solitary beasts who did not flock together. Yet those here ultimately treated others as prey that would become their own flesh and blood. Show even the slightest opening and in the next instant your throat would be torn out. That very tension was a thin thread keeping these savage beasts in check. Even Uruka, who had little interest in others and thus little hostility, likely held no sense of camaraderie toward those present here. The one who accurately understood this situation, and perhaps the only one, was Stark. Though he had no intention of aiming for others' throats himself, he neither denied a system where he himself might be targeted within Sterncross Academy. Man, this turned into a real hassle, just as Stark began seriously considering, maybe I should just dump this on someone else and go to sleep. The nightclub's heavy soundproof door was kicked open violently, and a mix of footsteps and hoarse shouts echoed through the hall. Hey, we know there are Sterncross brats in here, drag them out right now. Looking over, they saw a group of men flooding into the club, centered around a large, round-bodied man with glasses and carrying iron pipes, wooden swords, and metal bats. Which one of you punks pulled that shit on us? Shaku Jigoku, scorching hell. If you don't step up, we're breaking 3 teeth at a time from everyone in this place every 10 minutes. Who the hell is that? When Uruka muttered that without much interest, Zyro gave a wry smile as he looked at the man beside the fat one, whose face was dented like it had been stepped on. Ah, that, they're buddies of the Umbrella Thief, customers of Jingawa-senpai. Hearing that, the students leaned over the railing from the upper floor looking down, but so he's upgraded from Umbrella Thief to full-on Umbrella Robber now. That's hilarious. Doesn't look like they're here for umbrellas. Noiji, the cause of all of this trouble, simply let out a sneering laugh, and Stark, though looking annoyed, showed no sign of tension. Aren't those guys just some small-time gang from the next town over? Didn't think even trash like that would stroll in here this boldly. Askin let out a long sigh, lamenting the future in his own way. Yet without feeling even a shred of danger toward the gang below, he muttered, "This town's atmosphere might finally be beyond saving." Chapter 4 begins as we return to Karakura Town Eastern District in front of Cafe Asquiaro. Oh, looks like it's finally gonna clear up, huh? Looking up at the sky, where the light rain had thinned out into a faint drizzle, the orange-haired boy poked his head out of the cafe. Having already paid his bill ahead of the others, the boy pulled his plain black jump umbrella from the stand and stepped out onto the street, mulling over whether he should open it or if he didn't need it anymore. Then, almost like they'd been waiting for him, a thick, rough voice rang out. "Been waiting on you, Kurosaki." Whoa, the instant he turned, a wooden sword came flying straight at his face. But the orange-haired boy slipped past it by a hair's breadth and caught sight of his attacker. Looking ahead, there were over a dozen guys from other schools waiting outside the cafe, gripping wooden swords and the like. And one flashy-looking punk with a chain hanging from his nose piercing lifted his wooden sword again with a filthy, hostile grin. "Guess this is where it ends for you, huh, Kurosaki Ichigo?" Shut the hell up. Not letting him finish, he grabbed the guy by the jaw and slammed him straight down to the ground. With his jaw nearly dislocated, the man lost his balance on reflex and was driven face first into the ground. Ah, Yoko-chin, you alright, Yoko-chin? Yoko-chin, as the delinquents behind him broke into an uproar, the orange-haired boy rushed forward in a fluster, grabbing the guy by the collar and holding him up. You don't go putting on a one-man show using my name right in front of a packed cafe. You're gonna make it so damn embarrassing. I won't be able to come back here again. We then formally introduced to Kurosaki Ichigo, 1.5 months until he turns 16, hair color orange, eye color brown, special skill, none in particular. It's not a one-man show. I actually like the food at this place, you dumbass. If I get banned from here, you gonna take responsibility for that, huh? After getting his face slammed hard, the nose-chin delinquent is shaken back and forth as his consciousness starts to blur. Kurosaki, you're the one I'm gonna. More importantly, who the hell are you? The guy knew his name, but Ichigo had absolutely no idea where he might have picked up that kind of grudge. He vaguely felt like he might have run into some guy with a chain hanging from his nose back in early spring, but if he doesn't remember him, then he probably wasn't anyone important. You bastard, don't screw with me. One of the guys, probably one of the nose-pierced punk's friends, lunged at Kurosaki Ichigo with a punch, yelling out "drop dead." Oh, with a quick light twist of his body, he swapped positions with the nose-pierced guy whose collar he was holding. A strangely light, almost comical impact sound rings out as a delinquent's punch slams straight into the side of the nose-pierced guy's face. Whoa, Yoko-chin. Ah, my bad, reflex. It didn't seem like he meant to use him as a shield, and Ichigo apologized naturally. In that moment, the other punks all rush him at once. Ichigo deftly evades the punches, kicks, wooden swords, iron pipes, and all the attacks coming at him from every side, and just as skillfully, he fires back precise counter-strikes with back fists and rising kicks against all of them. In the middle of that, one delinquent quietly slips up behind Ichigo and tries to bring a bat down on him. A hand suddenly appears from the side and catches the metal bat as if it were made of plastic. At some point, without anyone noticing, Kensei Muguruma had appeared. The delinquent, his hand going numb like he had just punched a tire, looked at Kensei and let out a shaky half laugh. Thanks. As he backed off behind the group, Kensei, who had just finished paying and stepped out of the cafe, takes a quick look at the situation and slightly raises one eyebrow. You with them, Kurosaki? He replies, I don't know any washed up comedians. Don't go calling me washed up, I'm not a comedian in the first place. The nose-pierced guy, who had been down until now, hears Ichigo's voice, jumps back up, grips his wooden sword again and shouts. You were holding back just cause we're in front of the shop, weren't you? If you want, I can go inside that cafe and start wrecking the place while yelling your name, you hear me? Has he already made peace with ending up in juvenile detention, or does he just not even consider that the police might show up? The nose-pierced guy even starts considering grabbing one of the customers inside as a hostage, but man, that's just pathetic. Because of you, they're gonna have to shut the place down and run a closing sale. Halfway through, his words suddenly stopped. That won't do, Kurosaki-kun. A chill ran through the air, and everyone felt time freeze in place. At some point, without anyone noticing, Gin Ichimaru had stepped out of the cafe and is now standing right beside the nose-pierced guy, a hand resting on his shoulder. That alone made it feel as if a blade, no, a gun was being pressed against him, and the nose-pierced guy completely lost the ability to move. Cold sweat poured from his entire body, and his throat dried up at an overwhelming rate. The delinquents around him felt the same chill run through their bodies, and even Ichigo was overcome by a sense of unease he couldn't quite explain. I've got something important to take care of, so you can save the roughhousing with your friends for later. Saying that to Kurosaki Ichigo, Ichimaru lightly pats the nose-pierced guy on the shoulder. In that instant, only Hitsugaya, who had just stepped out of the cafe, noticed it. For a split second, Ichimaru's fingers dug into the guy's neck. What are you doing, Ichimaru? Now that's the sort of face that makes it hard on me. You know, look at him, you've got everyone scared. As the rest of them slowly filed out, Ichimaru supported the nose-pierced man by the shoulder and handed him over to the delinquents nearby. looks like your friend's not feeling too great, you'd better take him home properly. Despite his calm tone the entire time, the delinquents are completely overwhelmed by Ichimaru's presence. They notice that the one they had been calling Yokochin is foaming at the mouth, but they cannot bring themselves to question Ichimaru and quietly back away. Yeah. Inside the cafe, the young manager lets out a relieved breath, thinking finally those troublemakers are gone, and changes the jukebox track to something different to lighten the mood. George Baker, Little Green Bag. That was a rhythm that lingers in the ear and grips the heart, a song famous as the opening theme of a classic film. Just like that film's opening, men dressed in black walk down the street, their steps are light, carrying the easy air of friends heading out to watch a movie together. The delinquents on either side shrink back, clearing a path written across their faces, yet they no longer even register in the sight of the 8 from Gote High. It is not only people who part to make way. The evening shower that had thinned into a fine drizzle has completely stopped, and the clouds have vanished from the city sky. The sun is beginning to dip toward night, yet the summer sky remains vividly blue. Guided by the sunlight, the young men clad in black continue down the road. Where are they headed? The one who knows the answer is the girl inside the cafe. The girl who had been seated behind them the entire time, her twin tails tied with red ribbons. In the end, what was left behind them was the girl with the hair clip. That girl, in a peach-colored dress, answers her mother, who asks, "Weren't those boys behind you scary?" When I dropped my handkerchief, they picked it up for me. They were nice people. That orange-haired guy, he helped me before too, you know. They said they're going to go have a duel with someone. The setting shifts to the nightclub looter. What the hell, was that you who did it, huh? A hulking man, well over 2 meters tall and nearly as wide across the torso, comes crashing down from the second floor lounge, pinning the sky blue haired boy beneath him. He shouted, as if translating it for them, "Kofuda-san, looks like it ain't that guy." Huh? Then who the hell are you supposed to be? Raising his voice in irritation, the hulking man that called Kofuda turns back toward the boy. But the sky blue-haired boy was already gone. Like I give a damn, a voice comes from below him. In the next instant, the sky blue-haired boy, who had slipped into his guard without him noticing, uses the spring of his inhuman body to drive a kick up into the man's gut. "Try making me give you my name by force." He spits out the taunt, but Kofuda no longer hears it. With bile rising in his throat, he is blown backward, his massive body slammed into a corner of the club. Kofuda-san, no way, Kofuda-san weighs almost 180 kilos. It seemed there was a lighting switch or something where Kofuda was slammed into, and beams of light begin to cut sharply through the dim interior of the club. Is this really the time to be standing there with that lukewarm look on your face? Inside the hall, where light and shadow dance to the pounding music, the sky blue-haired boy, Hyozaki Joe, Grimjow, declares boldly to the gang members who stand around him in confusion, "You're all about to get yourselves killed by me all at once. So you ended up taking them all down by yourself. What, was that just practice to you?" A few minutes later, Baz says this as he looks down at the many injured bodies sprawled across the floor. Though he was late to act, Baz had taken down several himself. However, perhaps because he considers them too insignificant to even bother counting, he says nothing about what he himself has done. Then Hyozaki Grimjow answers, sounding bored. "The one I'm killing today is Kurosaki. This isn't even enough to count as a warm-up." Though his clothes are dirtied, Hyozaki is almost completely uninjured as he cracks his neck and heads for the exit. Nice move. Now even if you lose today, you've got an excuse. You can just say you were tired. At the entrance, the others were already waiting, and Noiji tossed out a casual remark. "You're next after Kurosaki, be ready for it. Don't go barking like some stray cat, it just makes you look pathetic." Noiji Noitora fires back at Hyozaki Grimjow, whose killing intent has begun to seep through, but the contempt in his tone has faded, replaced in part by caution. To them, caution is almost the same as respect. Even the men in white school uniforms present can tell that. Even in this brief scuffle, Hyozaki has clearly grown stronger. Askin calls out to the bartender, "Sorry, I'll make it up to you somehow, so just smooth things over for now." He then walks out. With that, the club falls into a strange silence. At some point, the music that had been playing stopped and the only sounds left were the groans of the injured gang members. We've got 2 hours until opening. Can we clean this up? No, we can manage. Muttering to himself like that, the bartender with black and white dreadlocks, Furuhara Ryuda, tries to fire up the staff while imagining a future where the shop opens peacefully. We've got no choice. For now, throw these guys out into the back parking lot and scrub the floor clean. After that, dry it completely so customers won't slip. The staff hurry into action in a panic, and the club becomes filled with a different kind of noise than before. The groaning is annoying. Put on something loud, something flashy to take our minds off it. At the words of the man who serves as both manager and bartender, one of the staff hurriedly selects a song. Dikdale Miserlo, a piece known as Miserlo with origins in the Ottoman Empire, which spread across the world in the 20th century and has since been reborn across various genres. To the high-speed surf music arrangement of this exotic tune, the boys in school uniforms walk through the streets. The blue sky slowly begins to take on a reddish hue from the west, evoking the face of the night that is about to arrive. Where are they headed? The club's manager knew that they are going to do something that won't earn them a single yen. Perhaps someone like Askin or Zaido might turn it into some kind of gain, but from the manager's perspective it seemed entirely pointless. To match numbers with Gotei High and engage in a duel beneath such a vividly blue sky, or beneath a sunset beginning to take on a beautiful golden hue, those standing between boyhood and adulthood are said to be heading toward a great fight. On this day, just before the shift to summer uniforms, when spring and summer are in their final tug of war, letting their black and white school uniforms shine like funeral garments, they stride boldly through the city, an act that can only be called foolish. They themselves likely understand that. It may indeed be foolish, but it is not mere stupidity. Then why? How did they come to accept their own fists being stained with blood and mud? To tell that story, it is necessary to turn back time a little. More specifically, about a month before now, up to the day Kurosaki Ichigo enrolls at Gotei High School. Chapter 5, Side Gotei High School Part 1. This is a flashback chapter. Karakura Town on the street. Yokochin, the man with a chain hanging from his nose piercing, goes flying in a flashy arc and is slammed straight into a roadside garbage area. Several bags full of food waste cushioned the impact, but even that couldn't completely absorb the momentum, and the air was violently squeezed out of his lungs. He probably wants to scream something, but the crushing pain gripping his lungs wouldn't allow it. Shit, his groaning sounds like some Canadian. You're fine, take a deep breath, Yoko-chin. The tough-looking delinquent tries to get up, tears welling in his eyes. Around him, the other delinquents throw out hurried encouragement, their expressions mixed with impatience and unease. Meanwhile, the orange-haired boy who had just kicked him into the garbage in a single blow, Kurosaki Ichigo calmly pointed something out to the group. Take a deep breath isn't the problem that he can't breathe in the first place. That guy. Why the hell are you the calm one here? And what the hell was all that all of a sudden? Shouting angrily, the delinquents close in around Ichigo. Even though it's the last day of spring break, a lot of them are still in their school uniforms. Whether that's some kind of fashion or simply because they had nothing else to wear, it's impossible to say. To the naked eye, a group of tough-looking boys in school uniforms surrounding someone in casual clothes would look intimidating to an uninvolved bystander. But the person at the center of it all, Ichigo, remains completely calm and silent. Then the nose-pierced delinquent with the chain finally manages to get his breath back. Eyes still wet and coughing now and then, he stepped up in front of Ichigo. What the hell are you? Just passing through. After answering in a matter-of-fact tone, Ichigo thought for a moment, then voiced what was by all accounts an extremely peaceful suggestion. They always say that if you're gonna ask someone their name, you should introduce yourself first. But I don't really care what your name is, so can I just go now? Like hell you can, you screwing with me. Veins bulging on his forehead, the nose-chain delinquent barked angrily. You kick a guy straight into a garbage dump out of nowhere, and you don't think there's something you oughta say to me first, huh? Good thing it wasn't bottle collection day, huh? If it had been bottles, you'd be apologizing for almost killing me, you asshole. The nose-chain delinquent was shouting so hard it looked like a blood vessel might burst at any second, but inside he was panicking. That kick, it had come almost from his blind side, and from that one hit he couldn't help but realize just how much of a monster the orange-haired guy standing right in front of him really was. Hey, you serious? What the hell is this kid? Right when we are about to go rough up Chad, this little bastard has to come sticking his nose into our business. Chad was a huge kid who lived in his territory, ridiculously tough to an almost absurd degree. It pissed him off that even after getting beaten with bats and rocks, Chad would walk away looking completely unfazed, so he'd gathered a crowd to teach him his place. But isn't this guy more dangerous than Chad? Come to think of it, I heard rumors about some orange-haired guy over in the next town. For a delinquent, being able to accurately gauge how strong the other guy is an important skill. In that respect, this nose-chain delinquent's assessment was dead on. Actually, it was precisely because that instinct usually didn't work that he kept provoking a boy named Chad who was vastly hopelessly out of his league. But even someone like him couldn't help but understand. The orange-haired boy's kick had been that striking, that overwhelming, and that impossible to mistake. However, bluffing when necessary is also an important skill for a delinquent. Even while sensing something unfathomably eerie about his opponent, he shouted toward his friends. Yakuchin actually does something smart for once. This guy might be even worse than Chad. The narrator immediately follows with, his judgment was completely correct, then instantly twists the knife. Actually, that judgment normally doesn't work at all. That's why he kept picking fights with Chad in the first place. The comedy comes from the fact that Yakuchin has finally encountered someone so obviously dangerous that even he can't misread the situation. Kill the bastard. To get straight to the point, it would be fair to say they put up a good fight. Translation note, the narrator is joking clearly. Their good fight amounted to landing exactly one kick on Ichigo's back before getting completely demolished. Big brother, thank you. As Ichigo casually brushed the dust off his back, a little girl in a pink dress thanked him. Oh, you okay? Yep. To the boys who had been brawling with a gang of delinquents barely 10 seconds earlier, she gave a bright smile without showing the slightest trace of fear. Cradled in her arms was a puppy still small enough to fit in them. A few minutes earlier, a little girl had been out walking her dog when her puppy barked at a group of delinquents. The nose chain guy tried to kick it away for getting in his way. The girl stepped in front of the puppy to stop him, only to be shoved aside by the other delinquents, who laughed as they did it, sending her tumbling onto the ground. Why did you beat those people up for us? Faced with the little girl's innocent, unguarded gaze, Ichigo thought for a moment, then said the first thing that came to mind. Because I didn't think there were still idiots around these days pulling something that cliche. Ichigo's basically saying that delinquents are acting like manga villains. Looking at the delinquents sprawled on the ground, he continued absent-mindedly stroking the puppy's neck with the back of his hand while the girl held it. So I figured I might as well do something cliche too. While holding the puppy, which kept licking his fingers, the girl asked something else that had been bothering her. With complete innocence, so nothing more than a child's honest question, "Big brother, why are you so strong? Are you a fighter?" However, Kurosaki Ichigo had no answer for such a pure innocent question. As he says, who knows? I didn't think people pulled that kind of cliche villain crap these days. It wasn't some offhand answer like I never really thought about it. If anything, it sounded like the answer of someone who had genuinely thought about it and arrived at that conclusion. Maybe in my previous life I was some kind of monster or something. Ichigo shrugged and smiled with a faint trace of melancholy about him. He didn't notice that behind him someone was watching him from a short distance away. So, Metropolitan High School Impressions blog about Karakura City's Gotei High School. The narrator here is writing in the voice of a casual blog author, not a formal historian. Gotei High School is a long-established high school in Karakura City, boasting a history of nearly 100 years. It is said that before the war, it was a private academy known as Gotei Shino Academy, but after passing through years of history and reorganization, it now stands in Karakura City as a public high school. The extraordinary man who founded this school in his youth and who still serves as its current principal, Yamamoto Genryusai Shigekuni. He is said to have surpassed the age of 115 and yet remains alive, leading to rumors that he might soon end up in the Guinness World Records for longevity. At this year's entrance ceremony, he reportedly tightened the students' nerves with a terrifyingly imposing presence that showed no hint whatsoever of his age. Its academic ranking is fairly average, but its top students are exceptionally capable, and judging by its record over the years, its university placement rate into prestigious institutions is remarkably high for a public school. At the same time, it also enrolls a considerable number of students regarded as troublemakers or delinquents, and has attracted public attention as an unusual high school where all kinds of personalities gather under one roof. That said, it's not as though the student body is filled with the stereotypical sort who go around smashing classroom windows or repeatedly shoplifting and shaking people down for money. If someone actually kept pulling that sort of thing, before suspension or expulsion, they'd first receive a summons from Principal Yamamoto, and what would happen after that has become one of the school's 7 mysteries, retold in countless different versions. That said, situations like that rarely end up requiring intervention from the teachers, as they're sometimes thrown out by fellow students shortly after enrollment. So the implication here is that students usually deal with these troublemakers themselves. In other words, many of the students who gather at Gotei High are people with more power than they know what to do with. That in itself is not considered a bad thing. Most young people, to one degree or another, are carrying around something they don't quite know how to handle. And the stronger that excess becomes, the harder it can become to keep it under control. If I were to give the clearest example of that, it would probably be a tendency to pick fights. One example of that is this. At the very beginning of the new school year this year as well, there was reportedly a major brawl in front of the school gates involving delinquents from a nearby high school. I'm not necessarily recommending that anyone enroll, but if that energy can be directed toward the right path, then it may prove to be a good environment for children who feel they have something inside them they don't know what to do with. Starting with the kendo and karate clubs, many of its clubs have gone on to achieve national championships in individual sports, and that can probably be considered proof enough. So Chapter 6, Gotei High School, first day of the first term. The day after the entrance ceremony, the class assignments and orientation had already been completed the day before, and for the new students, this was the day that truly marked the beginning of high school life. The day regular classes would finally begin. Yet, in front of Gotei High School, nearly 20 students from other schools were gathered. They appeared to be searching for someone, watching every student who passed through the school gates. Even they weren't going so far as to enter the school grounds, nor were they pulling any stunts like openly harassing students directly. For that reason, the situation had not escalated to the point where the police needed to be called, but a fair number of the freshmen slipped through the gates as though they were fleeing something visibly frightened. In contrast, the second and third year students of Gotei High School didn't spare those delinquents a second thought. If anything, remarks like, "Again, what did some famous guy enroll this year too? And last year it was Madarame's bunch, wasn't it?" These remarks were being traded back and forth, and there was even an air of amusement as people enjoyed the spectacle. And then, just like those upperclassmen, an orange-haired boy who tried to pass through the gates without paying them any mind, Kurosaki Ichigo found himself surrounded by the delinquents from the other schools, who until only seconds ago had been nothing more than part of the background. Yeah, for Ichigo, these guys barely even registered for him. Ichigo genuinely had no idea what was going on, and a question mark practically appeared over his head. "So, you finally showed up, you bastard. I hear you're the one who put our buddies down yesterday, Kurosaki." "Oh, that, you've got the wrong guy." With that, Ichigo once again treated the delinquents like background scenery and tried to walk right past them, but a blonde guy's hand, fitted with a pair of brass knuckles, shot out and blocked his path. "Don't give us that crap, you're the only damn guy around here with orange hair, you screwing with us." Looking at the droopy-eyed man with blonde hair and ear piercings glaring at him threateningly through narrowed eyes, Ichigo let out an exasperated sigh. "So you know my name, and here I thought it might be someone important. Turns out it's Chickenhead." Rather than the guy's face, it was the dyed hair that caught Ichigo's attention, and he remembered him as one of the punks who used to hassle him from time to time back in middle school. Chicken, that uniform isn't Gotei's, is it? Schools willing to take in a bird brain like you can't be that common, so you'd better make sure you attend class and don't get yourself expelled, alright? At words that sounded half sarcastic and half genuinely concerned, the delinquent who had just been dubbed Chickenhead, Oshima Reichi, lashed out with a furious punch. "Who the hell are you calling a chicken?" The fist wrapped around a pair of brass knuckles swept past the tip of Ichigo's nose. It was the kind of punch that would have shattered an ordinary student's face if it connected, but Ichigo evaded it by simply leaning back with the bare minimum of movement. "You little, acting like you're the same type as me." As he's complaining that Ichigo has the same delinquent image, attitude or look as him. "I told you we're nothing alike." Ichigo drove an uppercut straight into the jaw of the opponent who had just missed. Oshima was launched cleanly, beautifully into the air, then while still airborne, took another kick to the stomach that sent him crashing into his own companions. "How many times do I have to tell you before it sticks? You're a bird brain, that's why, honestly." "Rei-chan, you bastard, Kurosaki." The startled delinquents rushed at him, but to Ichigo their movements felt as though they were happening in slow motion. Exposed to killing intent that felt no more threatening than a lukewarm breeze, Ichigo dealt with the delinquents' attacks with calm efficiency. It was a boring fight. As he dodged their punches, he found himself thinking, so it's the same thing even in high school, huh? He was so untroubled by the fight that he had time to sink into old memories. Ever since he was little, Ichigo had been strong in a fight. That said, it wasn't as though Ichigo actually liked or enjoyed fighting itself. He wasn't some mild-mannered pacifist, but neither was he someone who went around picking fights for the fun of it. At the same time, if you asked whether he had a short temper, the answer would unquestionably be yes. When upperclassmen picked on him, his feet moved the moment their hands did, and when teachers came at him with petty accusations, he inevitably showed his rebellious streak. If it was criticism or ridicule for something he had brought upon himself, he could put up with it. But he was not mature enough to simply let an unreasonable attack pass, but at the same time he had the strength to strike back. His naturally coloured hair made him an easy target, his inability to ignore children or elderly people being harassed by delinquents, and the simple fact that he was strong in a fight all served as triggers. And so his days of being drawn into trouble one incident after another continued. There was no reason for his unnatural strength. It wasn't as though he possessed abnormally great physical strength. His dynamic vision and reflexes were certainly far beyond the norm, but even those weren't the result of any special training, nor could they be explained away by genes or anything of the sort. Nor had he been studying martial arts or combat sports since childhood. There was a time when he was nearly made to attend a local swordsmanship dojo, but after going a few times he wound up getting dragged into fights there as well, and even as a child he felt, at this rate, I'm going to cause trouble for the dojo too, so he gradually distanced himself from it. Even so, he was prone to getting dragged into fights, and on top of that, he was unusually strong in them. At the same time, his grades were excellent, and he was perfectly capable of getting along and communicating smoothly with other people. And precisely because of that, the fact that he was strong for no particular reason became a shackle on him instead. The delinquent upperclassmen called him an arrogant punk for dyeing his hair, while delinquents from neighbouring areas kept picking fights with him because beating the orange-haired kid would make a name for them. He even considered pretending to be weak and letting people beat on him until they got bored of it, but somehow he could never choose that option, because it felt like losing to something unfair. If there was only one explanation that could be given for his strength, it might have been because, closely tied to the short temper mentioned earlier, he possessed an innate hatred of losing. From here on as well, at least until he entered the working world, he thought these same kinds of days would simply continue. And then around that time, his father Kurosaki Isshin said to him, "Have you thought about what you're going to do after middle school? If you're considering your future, how about going to Gotei High? It's a great choice. After all, it's your old man's alma mater, so there's no way it can be wrong. If you're going to respect your father as the guiding light of youth, the Blue Spring father, now's your chance, Isshin told him. Needless to say, after Ichigo shot back, shouldn't somebody have fixed your upbringing first? The conversation devolved into a fight. In the end, he decided to enroll at Gotei High School for no greater reason than apparently a few of my childhood friends are going there too. Still, it wasn't as though he had particularly high expectations. Within the routine his life had already become, he intended to keep moving forward while holding onto one conviction: if I rot away, it'll feel like I've lost to my own life. Ichigo himself had never consciously put those thoughts into words, but guided instinctively by that feeling, he threw his fists again today just as he always had. But high school life, especially at a place like Gotei High School, was not an environment that would permit such resignation. After knocking down about 3 of Chickenhead's buddies, Ichigo noticed that things around him had suddenly gone quiet. Thinking that there was no way all 20 or so delinquents had suddenly decided to stand around and watch, Ichigo swept his gaze around. What he found was an unexpected sight. Every remaining delinquent from the other schools was sprawled out across the street, and standing among them was a female student holding a wooden sword. At her side, a braided girl wearing a armband identifying her as a member of the disciplinary committee was calmly binding the delinquent's wrists and ankles with duct tape. As Ichigo stood there bewildered by the complete annihilation of the other school's delinquents, the woman carrying the wooden sword, one side of her face hidden behind her hair, approached him with a proud, commanding stride. "It's been a long time, Ichigo." Hearing that voice and that old-fashioned way of speaking, Ichigo dragged the memory of who she was out of the back of his mind and said, "You're Kuchiki Rukia. So you weren't ungrateful enough to forget my name after all." Brief though it was, you did pass through the gates of the Kuchiki Dojo as one of its students. Don't forget to show proper respect to your senior. Rukia said this while nodding repeatedly, even her mannerisms carrying that same old-fashioned air. Here, however, it is not part of Rukia's spoken dialogue, but the narrator's description of how she is speaking and nodding. Rukia was the granddaughter of the swordsmanship dojo's master, the very dojo Ichigo had attended for only a few days in elementary school, and a skilled practitioner who had once placed among the top 4 in the nation at an elementary school kendo tournament. There are mountains of things I would like to say to you, but I will at least commend you for not using the secret techniques of the Kuchiki dojo in such a worthless street brawl. Me, the guy who quit the dojo before he even learned any actual techniques. Both grandfather Ginrei, the master of the dojo, and my father, the assistant instructor, said that you possessed talent for the martial arts. Surely you could have picked up a technique or two simply by watching. In fact, it would be troublesome if you couldn't. You're still talking like you walked straight out of a swordsman novel. Ichigo said this in exasperation, but before the two could even properly renew their acquaintance from their elementary school days, a whistle suddenly sounded from the side. "You two freshmen over there, we need to hear what happened, so please come to the guidance office." Looking over, Ichigo saw the disciplinary committee member who had been binding the delinquents' hands and feet only moments earlier. She was a girl with notably sharp, dignified eyes and brows, and in her hand she carried a long ruler taller than she was. Senpai, hold on a second. I just got dragged into this. I saw you fighting in town the other day as well." Without thinking, Ichigo averted his eyes. Several incidents came to mind, but considering the area she was talking about, she was probably referring to the time he punched out that nose chain wearing guy who had kicked a dog. We'll be hearing about that as well, and more importantly, the disciplinary committee girl planted the ruler against the ground with a thump and declared forcefully, "That hair color of yours. Gotei High School does allow students to dye their hair whatever color they want, but you are required to obtain permission from the student council beforehand." You can actually get permission for that? Surprised by the unexpectedly liberal school culture at Gotei High, Ichigo nevertheless uttered words he had said countless times throughout his life. "No, you probably won't believe me, but this is my natural hair." That blonde student from another school over there stated that you dye your hair orange. Damn it, Chickenhead's gone and made this way more complicated. He had told Oshima countless times back in middle school, "This is my natural hair," but since the guy forgot every single time, Ichigo had long since given up trying to correct him. That said, continuing to get held up here by the disciplinary committee girl would make him stand out far too much, especially on the very first day of high school. After thinking for about 2 seconds, Ichigo decided the best course of action was simply to get out of there. "I'm aiming for perfect attendance and 0 tardies, so I'm out." Ichigo took off at a speed that would have guaranteed a recruitment offer from the track team and dashed straight through the school gates. Well, they'll probably focus on the girl carrying the wooden sword instead. As he ran along the path toward the school building, weaving through the crowds of students, Ichigo found himself thinking about the future. I can just explain everything properly after school or during lunch, I guess, though honestly, it'd be best if she just forgot about it altogether. As if I would forget, the voice came from right behind Ichigo. Whoa, looking back, he found that the upperclassman from the disciplinary committee had caught up to him and was running after him at a considerable speed, despite the fact that he had been moving pretty fast himself. What are you, some horror movie monster, senpai? Are you trying to say I had the face of a monster? The disciplinary committee girl accelerated even further, planted her ruler into the ground, and vaulted through the air like a pole vaulter, swinging around from above to land directly in front of Ichigo. As Ichigo stood there bewildered by what looked like a circus act, the disciplinary committee girl sharply thrust her ruler toward him. If you continue resisting, I'll tie you up just like those people from earlier. Ichigo put a considerable distance between himself and the ruler, kicked off the wall of a nearby bicycle parking area, and launched himself high into the air. Then, using a life-sized statue of the school principal as a foothold, he leapt straight through an open second-floor window of the school building. At Gotei High School, the classrooms were arranged such that first years occupied the second floor, second years the third floor, and third years the fourth floor. The classroom, whose window happened to be open on the floor, was in fact Ichigo's very own classroom, but without realizing that, he jumped inside in an attempt to hide himself. Sorry, he crashed into a student sitting by the window, causing the tool the student had been holding to fall to the floor. The one who silently picked it up was a sharp-eyed student wearing glasses. What had been dropped was an entire set of sewing tools used for embroidery. Peering down through the window, Ichigo noticed that the disciplinary committee girl was nowhere to be seen, and he breathed a sigh of relief. I guess she's not coming after me after all. Didn't think a high school disciplinary committee member would be that aggressive. You're noisy. A cold voice was directed at him from the bespectacled boy. I was under the impression that this was a high school attended by human beings. The words carried neither hostility nor hatred, but rather a clear, unclouded feeling of disgust. Receiving that head-on, Ichigo frowned and planted his hands on the boy's desk as he leaned forward. Yeah, crashing into your desk was my bad, but still. At Gotei High School, indoor shoes were generally not required and students wore their regular shoes inside the school as well. Of course, nobody expected students to come flying in through the window, so a small amount of dirt from Ichigo's shoes had scattered across the bespectacled boy's desk. After brushing the dirt away with his hand as casually as if he were erasing pencil marks, Ichigo addressed the bespectacled boy. So what you're saying, I'm some kind of monkey? Of course not. In an even matter-of-fact tone, the bespectacled student Ishida Uryu said that would be insulting to monkeys. Monkeys may have a violent side, but they're social creatures. Keep talking like that and I'll throw hands with you too, you bastard. A verbal fight. At that, Ishida adjusted his glasses with a finger and said to Ichigo, whom he had only just met, that would be far too much of a handicap. I wouldn't mind a fistfight either if it's something a barbarian like you happens to excel at. Hold on a second, isn't this conversation somehow making me sound like the bad guy here? From what I saw from here, you got into a fight in front of the school gates, ran from the disciplinary committee, and escaped by stepping on the principal's statue. By any reasonable measure, you are in fact the bad guy. Damn it, I can't even argue with most of that, and for the record, that fight was self-defense. Just as he was about to offer an explanation, the classroom door was flung open. Standing there was the disciplinary committee girl, apparently having sprinted up the stairs, breathing heavily. Seeing her there, Ichigo briefly felt as though he had actually become a character in a horror movie. The problem was that if she were a horror movie monster, he could at least fight back. Against a disciplinary committee member though, he obviously couldn't do that. Wishing the bespectacled boy in front of him were the disciplinary committee member instead, Ichigo promptly leapt back out through the window. As the girl says again, as the disciplinary committee girl rushed out of the classroom in pursuit, the classmates gathered around Ishida as they begin to murmur among themselves. That was Hinamori-senpai just now, right? The demon disciplinary committee member. The guy running away was Kurosaki Ichigo, wasn't it? The one everyone's been saying is insanely strong. Kurosaki Ichigo, I'm pretty sure that name was on our class roster. Listening to his classmates noisily chattering away over the whole exchange, Ishida let out a small sigh and resumed his work. In a voice so quiet that no one even could hear it, he murmured to himself, still in that same flat, matter-of-fact tone, it really does look like it's going to be a noisy year. Chapter 7, First Year A Certain Classroom. Hey, isn't that Hinamori? The classroom next to where Ichigo and the others had been making a commotion. Renji, who had been flipping through a tattoo magazine in the corner of the classroom, turned his eyes toward the uproar outside the window and watching the scene muttered these words. At the end of his gaze down below, Hinamori, a disciplinary committee member carrying a straight ruler, was chasing after an orange-haired boy. He could see her running around in pursuit. He didn't recognize the orange-haired boy, but if the boy was wearing a Gotei uniform, he was probably a first year. Come to think of it, he felt like he had seen some flashy orange hair at the entrance ceremony. Renji continued watching the disciplinary committee member and the first year she was chasing. What the hell is he doing? Renji had attended the same elementary and middle school as Hinamori Momo, and together with a boy named Izuru Kira, they had been tied together by a long-standing odd sort of bond. Among the three of them, Momo alone was 1 year ahead, but because they were childhood friends, they were close enough that they normally spoke to each other without formalities. That orange head, he's got something. As he seems to be genuinely impressed as he recognizes Ichigo in this moment. Because of that, Renji knew Momo's physical abilities well as her skill with the staff that she had apparently picked up somewhere. Ordinarily, run-of-the-mill delinquents were the sort of people she could subdue with ease, regardless of whether they were male or female. If that was the case, then against someone like Momo, just who was that first year who was running circles around her at such incredible speed? Looking at the boy whose flashy hair only made him stand out even more, Renji smiled with faint amusement. I'd heard from Hisagi-senpai that this was the kind of high school where all the sharp-edged types end up gathering, but back in middle school I got dragged into plenty of incidents and I figured I'd build connections with a fair number of people because of it. Even so, I was being reminded of just how many things there were still that I didn't know. Maybe he's a transfer student from somewhere far away. No, now that I think about it, I did hear a rumor about some absurdly strong orange-haired kid. Even though it had only been a month, his middle school days somehow already felt like something from a distant past. Remembering them, Renji muttered to himself, "Doesn't look like this Gotei place is gonna let me get bored." In front of the old 2-story wooden school building, the back and forth struggle between Ichigo and the disciplinary committee member Momo continued. As Momo tried to snag his legs with her ruler, Ichigo dodged it at the last instant and sprang upward. Realizing that his landing would be targeted as well, he kicked off a wall and shifted his position far to the side, throwing off his opponent's perception. Momo's staff techniques were good enough to stand alongside those of trained police arrest technique practitioners. The fact that Ichigo kept avoiding that relentless series of attacks made it clear he was no ordinary person, and Momo herself understood that. However, that was no reason for her to stop carrying out disciplinary enforcement. Police, stop resisting. That's my line. If you want to talk after school is fine, isn't it? You expect me to trust the words of someone who was hoping I'd forget about it. That's exactly why I can't argue with it, damn it. Ichigo had also started thinking, wouldn't it be faster to just let myself get caught and explain everything? But his natural hatred of losing had kicked in, and he had a feeling that if he got caught somehow, Rukia would laugh at him with a dismissive snort. So half out of sheer stubbornness he kept running. Watching that first year from atop the old school building, not from the rooftop itself but from the building's sloped triangular roof, were two female students. Oh, to evade Momo's relentless assault to that extent, he's quite something. He's not someone worthy of Yoruichi-senpai's attention. At that level, even I could. To the girl whose eyes sharpened with something like jealousy, the dignified upperclassman called Yoruichi said, Now, don't say that, Soifon. I know your agility better than anyone. Yoruichi-senpai, your words are more than I deserve." Leaving aside Soifon, who lowered her gaze with flushed cheeks, Yoruichi leapt from the roof with a cat-like motion and landed directly in front of Ichigo and the others. Shihoin-senpai, after watching Shiho and Yoruichi jump from the roof of a 2-story building and casually stand up as though nothing had happened, Ichigo's eyes widened. Didn't she break her legs? Meanwhile, Momo narrowed her eyes. Shihoin-senpai, Soifon-san too. How many times do I have to tell you that the old school building is off limits? After dropping down with the protruding ledge of the first floor serving as a cushion, Soifun landed below while Momo pressed toward Yoruichi, who wore a fearless smile. Having been called out, Yoruichi merely smiled as though it didn't concern her in the slightest and proposed a deal to the disciplinary committee member. If you'll overlook me and Soifun, then I wouldn't mind helping you catch that first year over there, you know. Momo says, I won't make that kind of backroom deal. Oh, honestly, both of you report to the student guidance office afterward. I promise, we'll come by later, so don't worry about us and go on chasing him. Oh wait, spotting an opening, Ichigo had already taken off and Momo chased after him. She broke into a run. Are you really going to go, Yoruichi-senpai? She replies, I keep my promises. To the skeptical Soifun, Yoruichi answered with a bright laugh. Well, I'll show up at least once before graduation. Or if you prefer after graduation, I could drop by when I come back to visit as an alumni. That might have its own charm. Looking at Yoruichi, who seemed completely serious and utterly unapologetic, thinking how magnificently confident she is, Soifun's cheeks grew slightly red. With what little remained of her conscience, she felt sympathy for the disciplinary committee member Momo and resolved that next time she would report Yoruichi's own rule violations as well and go get scolded on behalf of both of them. But that's a story for another time. At the martial arts hall, others were watching the commotion in front of the old school building from another vantage point. Watching from the window of the Kendo Hall on the second floor of the martial arts building were Madarame Ikaku and Ayasegawa Yumichika. Well, looks like we got some pretty lively ones this year. We've only been here for a year ourselves, you know. You don't get it, Yumichika, it's about the feeling. After finishing cleaning up following the Kendo Club's morning practice, while they were getting ready to head to their classrooms, they happened to notice the chase between Ichigo and the disciplinary committee member. But Hinamori's staff skills aren't for show, and they aren't some childish game. She's seriously skilled, but to evade it that thoroughly. It's not really the movement of someone who's trained in the same kind of traditional martial arts either. Yeah, that's just experience. He's fought all kinds of people carrying all kinds of weapons over and over, and not just 10 or 20 times. Those are the movements of someone whose experience has settled into instinct through a mountain of real fights. It's rough and very far from the kind of beauty I look for though. While having that conversation, Ikaku and Yumichika headed toward their classroom. More than that, I was surprised Yoruichi-senpai jumped off the roof of the old school building. How the hell didn't she break her legs doing that? What is she, a cat? Now that you mention it, apparently a first year with animal-like movements enrolled at Sterncross too. As Yumichika brought up the name of Sterncross Academy, another school in Karakura Town, Ikaku laughed. So no matter where you look, it's nothing but kindling. At a time like this, when people are coming and going, it's a good chance to clear out what's been smouldering. Well, it doesn't matter to me where or what catches fire. Showing a side of himself different from the one he normally shows as a Kendo Club member, as though he could hardly wait for the trouble yet to come, Ikaku grinned with evident enjoyment. If sparks are going to fall on me, I'll just crush the whole damn thing. In front of the school building, hey, what the hell happened here? Why are Rei-chan and the others all tied up? Having gathered to rough up Kurosaki Ichigo, the delinquent groups from other schools who had arrived late stood there pale-faced and stumbling over their words. They had figured that roughly 20 people who arrived first would be more than enough. In fact, they'd deliberately shown up late because they didn't want to get dragged into any police trouble afterward, but when they actually arrived at the scene, the situation was far beyond that. Instead of police trouble, they found their own friends lying on the road with their hands and feet bound in duct tape. Among the students passing by, the first years hurried past while staring as though they were looking at something bizarre, but the students who appeared to be second and third years walked right past as though they were already used to this sort of thing. Seeing that unsettling scene, the late arriving delinquents felt cold sweat running down their backs. Maybe it wasn't Kurosaki who did this, maybe Gotei's guys got to them. I've heard this place, Sterncross and Hakuza are all pretty damn dangerous. Then from behind them, a voice suddenly called out, "Hey." When they hurriedly turned around, they found a well-built student wearing a Gotei High uniform standing there. "Those guys lying over there, are they your friends? What the hell do you want?" "Idiot, knock it off." As a delinquent started putting on a tough front, one of his friends stopped him and hurriedly whispered in his ear, "That's Muguruma, the guy who took down the Barracuda gang all by himself." "You mean the guy who flipped over the jeep that tried to run him over with his bare hands?" When he asked for confirmation, the one who had whispered nodded vigorously, and the listener broke out in a cold, greasy sweat. Completely ignoring the delinquent's whispering rumors about him, Kensei began speaking in a calm, matter-of-fact tone. "A lot of the teachers at our school are lazy. They hardly get involved in anything that happens outside the school grounds. That said, even they can't just leave these guys lying around over there forever. They're in the way. Right, if they're your friends, take them and go home, got it? Why the hell should we?" At that, Kensei's eyes narrowed slightly. Just from that alone, the delinquents were convinced they were about to die. However, Kensei neither acted nor threatened them. He simply spoke calmly and delivered a single warning to the delinquents. "At this rate, those guys are gonna take them away, you know." The ones Kensei indicated with a tilt of his chin were two female students who appeared to be trying to carry away their unconscious companions. There were two female students. One of them was a tall girl with quiet, composed presence. The short, silver-haired girl wearing glasses had grabbed the legs of the delinquents, who appeared to be the most badly injured, and was dragging them through the front gate. From the light blue shoulder bag she carried, various kinds of handles of something were sticking out. Were they tools or perhaps some sort of weapons? Seeing a hammer tumble out and roll across the ground, the delinquent's breathing stopped. Whoops, saying that, the silver-haired girl picked up the hammer and slipped it back into her bag. Without even noticing that people were staring at her as though she were a murderer, Kotetsu Isane continued dragging the students into the school building. She was the president of the cooking club and at the same time the head of an organization called the First Aid Club. It was something like an active, field-orientated version of the health committee. Because Gotei High places heavy emphasis on martial arts clubs, and because fights and violent incidents tends to occur both inside and outside the school, student first aid and rescue activities have developed into an active club activity of their own. As a result, her current actions are simply an act of kindness, an attempt to bring the more seriously injured delinquents from other schools inside and give them first aid. That said, why she has a hammer in her bag is something even the students around her don't understand. And then as for the other female student, with half her face covered by a jet black mask and distinguished by her long black hair, more than anything else, what drew the eye was the enormous something she carried in her hands. Holding a red weapon reminiscent of a Grim Reaper scythe with eyes that revealed none of her emotions, she dragged the fallen students, scrape scrape, toward a place resembling an abandoned garage near the school grounds. While all this was going on, the silver-haired girl picked up the hammer and slipped it back into her bag. The object, which looked like an enlarged caliper, was more precisely something called a rinshaku, a tool used to measure the thickness of logs and timber. To people unfamiliar with it, however, the red cloth wrapped around it created a very different impression. It ended up looking like some terrifying weapon or instrument of torture. To begin with, even if they had known it was a rinshaku, watching someone carry it while dragging unconscious bodies around would still look like a scene from a horror movie. What is that? The silver-haired one is one thing, but the black-haired one, no idea. She's definitely one of our first years, but what exactly she is, I couldn't tell you. Kensei said this as though it were somebody else's problem. The delinquents went pale. Oh, and one more thing, I don't know her name, but that girl also seems to be one of our first years. If you lay a hand on her, she'll crush every last one of yours. Hearing those words delivered in the same flat, matter-of-fact tone, the delinquents ended up collecting their unconscious friends while practically on the verge of tears. In the end, as for that black-masked first-year girl, what exactly Kurotsuchi Nemu had been trying to do, not a single person, including Kensei, ever found out. Even within Gotei High, a school already packed with unusually eccentric students, she quickly gained a reputation as an especially bizarre first year, and her name became known alongside Kurosaki Ichigo's. Later on, wait, I'm in the same category as her. He would eventually object to that classification, but nobody paid him any attention. And that's the end of chapter 7. So this is all that has been translated of Don't Bleach My Fist so far. If you've enjoyed this alternate reality Bleach story, then let me know by continuing the discussion in the comments. What are your thoughts about Ichigo's first day at school so far? I'd love to read all of your thoughts about this brand new Bleach light novel, so definitely continue the discussion in the comments and let me know if you want a part 2 continuing where the story leaves off from chapter 7. A massive thank you goes out to all of my amazing Patreon supporters for helping to make this video possible. If you also want to support the channel and see your name in the end of my videos, then check out my Patreon, which has loads of perks like early video access and so much more. Thank you for sticking around till the end of the video, and whatever you contribute will mean a lot to me.